Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that McNally Robinson Booksellers is located in Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, the homeland of the Métis Nation. McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are gathered here today in partnership with our good friends at the Winnipeg International Writers Festival to celebrate this incredible poetry collection, Rump and Flank by Carol Harvey Steski. You may applaud her. This is, of course, published by NeWest Press. It's an incredibly just delectable collection. It's one of those books that just begs to be read out loud. And Steski's gift for language is just utterly incredible. It's a completely intoxicating and wonderful collection, and I, for one, am very excited to hear the author herself read from it. But before we get to that, you'll have to tolerate my presence for just a few moments as I give you the lay of the land. So there'll be a reading up here from Carol, followed by a conversation to my left, hosted by Ariel Gordon. Then we'll open the floor to questions from you folks. So just to ensure that all the questions are audible to those at home, I will ask you to ask me the questions, which I will then repeat into this microphone. A little bit odd, but it ensures that everything can be heard. If you're watching on YouTube, you can write your questions into the chat, and we'll be sure to put them to Carol as time permits. Now, because my brain is essentially oatmeal after months of hosting events during COVID, I just ask that you keep your questions relatively short and in the form of questions, because rest assured you'll have ample time to interrogate Carol when you get to the signing table immediately afterward. At the close of the event, you'll be hearing from Charlene Deal from the Winnipeg International Writers Festival, and then we'll ask you all to remain in your seats for just one moment while we safely transport Carol across the store to the signing table, at which point you may go and have copies of your book signed. Now, you can get your book signed before you pay for them. Just please do remember to pay for the books before you physically leave the store. Other than that, that's more than enough for me, so I'm just going to introduce the wonderful people that will be speaking here tonight. Now, in the words of the publisher, Carol Harvey Steski's tenacious and unapologetic debut, Rump and Flank explores the body in nature's many incarnations: human, animal, plant, microbe, even chemical. The result is a fantastical poetic work that sheds lights on what bodies, especially female ones, endure, probing the full range of experiences from pleasure and hope to deep loss and trauma. Carol Harvey Steski grew up under the wide Winnipeg sky. Her poems have been published in the anthology, Another Dysfunctional Cancer Poem Anthology, and literary magazines including the Thames Review, Carousel, Freefall, Untethered, Room, Prairie Fire, and Contemporary Verse 2. She won Freefall's 2019 annual poetry contest and was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. As a young adult survivor of melanoma, she has been a guest on CBC Radio Manitoba, speaking about the therapeutic benefits of writing through disease. She lives in Toronto with her husband and daughter, working in corporate communications. Her host, Ariel Gordon, is a Winnipeg, Treaty 1 territory-based writer, editor, and enthusiast. She is the ringleader of Rites of Spring, a National Poetry Month project with the Winnipeg International Writers Festival that appears in the Winnipeg Free Press. Her most recent book is Tree Talk, published by At Bay Press, a public poetry project where Ariel hangs poems in trees and asks passerby to add their thoughts, ideas, and secrets. She is currently, and appropriately, the publicist at the Winnipeg International Writers Festival. And while I would normally offer a few words of sarcastic commentary on Ariel, I'm feeling very beneficent tonight, so instead I will just grudgingly admit that she is a wonderful writer, and we are delighted to have her as part of the event. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Carol Harvey Steski.
Wow, thanks for that, John. I could listen to you speak like for hours and hours and hours. You just have like such a beautiful voice. Wow, this is so exciting. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Just get myself organized here. I'm so like honored to be here and just grateful. All the events that I've done recently, like the in-person events, are usually to strangers in the audience. And so to see all these lovely people that I know staring back at me is just a really special thing for me. So I'm excited and also a tiny little bit terrified, so that's okay. But you all look great in your underwear right now. I have lots of people to thank here, so I'm going to do that now. Charlene from Thin Air, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of it. Yeah, Thin Air. It's such a great festival. It's so important to writers near and far. And yeah, and I just thank you for all of the hard work of your staff and volunteers behind the scenes. To John and to McNally Robinson also, oh my goodness, the iconic McNally Robinson. It's just a real treat to be here. And John was amazing when I reached out to him, thanks to Dave Williamson, who's sitting here as well. And I reached out to John and he just hopped all over this idea and really made it work and talked to the festival organizers. And so I'm very grateful for that, John. Thank you. My publisher, NeWest, I'd like to thank them as well because I'm just very grateful. They're so wonderful to work with. And Carolina, their marketing person, has just been very accommodating to me. It's been a little bit of a crazy time and she's always kind of looking out for me and helping me, looking for opportunities for me, and I'm very grateful for that. And to my family and my friends, many of whom are here tonight. That's very exciting to me. Big shout out to my parents who are tuning in from home. I mean, like, hopefully that they're connected. I'm actually not really. Oh, good. I thought maybe my dad might be trying to call me right now to troubleshoot. So I'm happy that we've got him all set up. That's good, Don. Thank you very much. Siblings are for. Thank you. But thank you to my family. Who just always stand behind me in all of the antics that I take on. So let's talk about the book. This is a labor of love, I have to say, and I know it's like a total cliche, but it really is. And like the longest labor in all of bookdom, it honestly started like in the 90s. Yeah, and I had stopped writing actually for about a decade. So I feel very grateful that poetry came back into my life, or it came to me, or I came to it, or one of those things happened. And here we are today. It's just like, I'm still kind of in shock because, yeah, the pandemic has kind of made me a little bit crazy as well. But I just feel so grateful that here we are. I've got this book, and yeah, I'm excited. And for those who don't know, I'm a Winnipegger, born and raised here. I went to school here. My family's all still here, and Cheryl, you make me cry. And I cut my literary teeth here before I took off to Toronto for the last 20 years. But you know, it's true what they say. You can take the girl out of the prairies, but you can't take the prairie out of the girl. And I'm just, I always seem to find a way to reflect that prairie sentiment into my work. So I'm excited to share some poems with you tonight. So I'm going to start with the first poem in the collection. I'm going to put my glasses on. The first poem in the collection, it's actually where the book title gets its name. And before it came out, people would say to me, like, what's the name of your book? And I would say, oh, it's Rump and Flank. And they would be like, what? I'm like, yeah. But like it happened, I guess, a number of times. So I like sent a panicky email to my editor and the production person at NeWest, and I was like, I think we need to change the name of the book. It's just like, I don't think people are understanding it. And my editor, Douglas Barber, he was just so very calm, and he just replied back to me. He's like, no, that's the thing that hooked me. It was, I love the title of the book. That's what hooked me. And then Claire, the marketing and production person, got back to me right away, and she's like, it's too late. Like it is. So, anyway, this is a long story because the poem is like the shortest thing ever, but it is, yeah, it's basically sort of the tiny little commentary on the ways that women are, the bits and pieces of us are judged and valued instead of like within our patriarchal society that we unfortunately still seem to be in. And instead of looking at women holistically, they sort of carve us up sort of like a meat chart. So this is various cuts. She is rump and flank. She is side and swivel hip, twirling skirt steak, chop smack and tender in the loins. She is bone in. She is marrow soft and baby back. With lily-livered open eyes of round, she is all ribs, all tongue tips and shoulder blades, and wings made of fascia, flayed. That's great. And it was so awkward, right? You never know, like sometimes people clap or sometimes they never know what to do. This next one is actually sort of pandemic related, I guess. The production of this book took place during the pandemic, but it's actually more the fact that during the pandemic, a lot of people went on antidepressants or up their dosage. Anybody show hands? Yeah. Anyway, several years ago when I was on them, and I just kind of decided I would willy-nilly go off of them all on my own, see how that goes. Anyways, this is my public service announcement for why you shouldn't do that. You should really have your doctor's oversight while you're going through that. So, yeah. Okay, so this is weaning off antidepressant early days. Someone call the fuzz. A conundrum is coming down, down, has landed. Rolling brownouts, intermittent fizz of lights like cigarette drags, electrical surges, fried brain meat in its pot of bone. Nerves are scalped, even shadows cause the skin to chicken. Muscles screech, and when the head turns, the eyes take 3 seconds to catch up like a live TV sensor delay, but in real time, the body sweats its full weight into the sheets. Relieved of a lifeline, borders become frayed, rulebook abandoned, the mind has no plan for how to behave. Nostalgic for the doldrum days. That might have been my dad calling. Okay. So water, just 1 second, I'm gonna speak in water. Water sort of is a frequent thing that I write about. I don't know if it's just because in the prairies, we have lots of rivers and lakes, and we're a maritime province. Up north, we have an ocean and everything. But I guess maybe feeling like a little bit landlocked, I'm always sort of looking for water. So it does come up quite a bit in my work. And this poem in particular is about an algae bloom that happens in the Gulf states. And it's kind of a cyclical thing. It's every sort of 3 years, and it's just really devastating for the marine life in the area. So this is just a little sort of snapshot of what that's like to see the impact of this red tide, it's called. Red tide. This Florida day, a pleasant oven with its blue door cracked. Mirage escapes, hovering at the junction between sea and sky. Sand is warmed glass. Hermit crabs gather at rare hot tub parties with the neighbors, chat up new real estate ventures, eyeing the right time to flip. This niche, a seller's market, despite the downturn. Abandoned beach. The smell of mass murder slaps us in the face. Red tide has blossomed in the long throats of ocean locals and quietly choked each one off, gill by poisoned gill. There, shh. Evicted carcasses scattered like blown out tires along the Taniami. Various phases of decay displayed and baking here. Bone racks and bloated bellies, cheek holes and fins. Before our eyes, the nightmare spreads, becomes the feasting seagulls, a time bomb of a fish fry, and not enough skin left on this carnage to hold even one last dying wish. And just sort of staying on that watery theme, this next poem is about the mighty king of the mollusks, the oyster, and all of the various ways that oysters serve us, or we exploit them, I guess is more accurately, in food and jewelry and aphrodisiac. This is Oyster Night. You were culled just from me, a plump tongue shocked upon the half shell, a whole note dropped headlong into the bleak song you were born to sing. Your eagerness to please people is legendary. Generations of necks decorated with the byproducts of your chronic irritation, a quiet, iridescent despair. If that weren't enough service, you compel us to covet the salty bodies of neighbors and strangers, or at least to flicker interest in our own bored relationships. I don't need a mignonette or hot sauce costume, just your fresh press against me, mouth to mouth, silk muscling silk. With one fell swoop and last gasp relieved, you're swallowed wave after wave back to sea. Okay, so from water to field. Okay, I'm gonna just turn this off now. I swear it's my dad. Sorry about that. Imagine. Where are you? That's what I call Okay. So yes, this next one is just a sort of memory. This got back to Prairies. A memory of a heat wave, and just the drama and sort of anticipation, both in that moment of a heat wave and an impending storm, and on the horizon of a girl's life. Truth or dare? The day the girl posed this to her best friend, a textbook summer scorcher. Their lungs were boiled pierogies, protected by gauzy cotton tank tops, and freckles that had tiptoed years earlier onto exposed shoulders and other sunny places today were dark and frantic. Everything seemed affected. Crickets stopped hopscotching the chalkboards with their nails, too tired or finally bored with the prairies. Tar bubbled in the streets grids, threatening the stability of the fault lines in the same way ratcheting gas prices jeopardized the lead-heavy 70s. A watering ban left its yellow brand on lawns, though the marigolds, always composed, snuck sips when no one's looking. But nothing could placate that sky. All afternoon cumulonimbus clouds advanced the plot on a stop-motion horizon, the only things around still moving by now. Foreshadowed looming teenage years, those dueling themes of relief and dread blooming to a head. Dare, she whispered. So this next one is also sort of on a cloud theme. Matus clouds are those like bulby, ball-like clouds that converge before a storm, sometimes after, but this poem is about the before. Matus is from the Latin word for mama, meaning mother, breast, or udder. And this was obviously named by a man because I just got it. Matus clouds. This thing is just the Matus clouds bubble and sag, Full breasts pulled south by the weight of mouths, a latched litter of kittens straining all resources. Glands engorged as water balloons hanging from gravity's fists, anticipation building. Or bagged milk, those plastic pouches brimming before the triangle tip is snipped to release the flow. As a girl, I used to hold them in my arms like wobbling babies, cradling a dream. Wait, the letdown is imminent. Triggered by infant's instinct, who knew the strength of their pull? Small tongues muscling the song from the instrument with perfect urgent embouchures, that voracious art of knowing what lies beyond the flesh, to harvest what you need. So next I will read, so I really wanted to write a poem about mosquitoes, but it's not, not like the, cliche, like Winnipeg has so many mosquitoes. It was, it's more about the life cycle of mosquitoes, and males live for about a week. Basically, they just exist to procreate, and then but the females get the shit done, right? So I thought that would be sort of an interesting thing to explore, and then of course I had to throw in like a dark sex thing at the end. Sorry, Avery, there's a tangle in the crowd. I'm so sorry about that. Mosquito breeding ground. Rain has not given up the ghost this spring. Our puppy hope soaked to a heavy-headed sag. We watch divots in the city's skin fill with our tears, laying layers of wet bedding for the nurseries. Soon, cesspool wombs bloat with embryos, new souls afloat on rafts of foam, spanning worlds, dreaming the same red stain. Emerging fresh from the gauze, high-pressured wannabe moms know the drill. Take to the air with tool belts and sensibilities strapped. While the males flit from lily to lily, chasing infinity, oblivious to nature's countdown on their ephemeral heads. Evening fields of green wheat breathe a sigh of relief at the wide sky's finely evolved palette. In a man-made crop circle, two lovers slap bugs off each other's asses. Interrupting the needle flow, they itch and curse at the damage done in bumps and blood drawn. The flush of fast sex siphoned from their cheeks, complexions drained to a zombie pallor that even the setting sun's bronze cast can't warm back up to human. I work in energy, the energy sector in Ontario, and I don't actually write a lot about energy, like it finds its way like a little bit in imagery and things like that, but this is one very sort of overtly like energy related poem. But at its core, it's really about like hope and looking for hope and silver linings when you don't always see it on the surface. This is coming of age. Pole to pole, fresh energy fries as electric grid trips across the kilomiles, dishing power to the people in a succession of microscopic flint strikes, shocked atoms spraying the stars as they burn. We barrel down the back roads of the backwoods of nowhere Northern Ontario, leave the future behind in a wake of sparks for balding and thinning towns littered with gasping 60s bungalows, those short-sighted minimalist trims and miniature windows pinched tight, smoked curtains closed to keep progress at bay. We plug into desolate teenage souls bored dim in subterranean rec rooms, cultivating grown-up hips and thoughts, long limbs fumble against the Chesterfield's tweed, generating static in high-fidelity cling. The kids can't conserve these urges, can't resist this essential service they provide to each other and the community at large, like a local utility, mainlining hope against the blackouts rolling in on one more infinite night. Two more. This next one I like to read because it involves my sister and my mom. Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. My mom might have a different opinion. So it's basically about being a kid in the 70s, early 80s, I guess, when you're sort of allowed to. Kids were a little bit more unsupervised, I guess, than they are now. So basically, you know, play with toxic, poisonous substances all day long, whatever. And then you sort of, you know, wonder, like, years later, like, what was that? When's that going to show up? Like, what's the after? Like, what does that look like? This is called Mercury Bomb, and in this case, it's mercury. Or play with all day. It's not quite the way that this is in the story, but it is true, as it is based on a true story. Mercury Bomb. Bored, my sister and I once cracked a glass thermometer in half, watched its blood ball burst and the quicksilver spill out the shaft, shimmering and cleaving into reproductions of itself, like funhouse mirrors giving birth and exiting a clown car. For hours, we watched this uncommitted straddler of states shatter and shapeshift as it pinballed across the headboard. As it slinkied, the staircase we made with our hands, dropping down, 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 like the Tin Man's tears. What cellular chaos was spawned that day in our toxic play while the eyes in the back of our mother's head expired? DNA rearranged into 70s plaid or permanently edited fingerprints? What chemical aftermath, decades in the making, might someday trigger little missiles to multiply, rippling and glittering like jumping fish in our autumn river veins? These days, I feel fine, though compelled to regular checkups, so I slip the cool, slim rod under my tongue and wait for that bloodshot to rise. I just have one more. Am I okay? I'm okay for time. So this last one that I will end on is a little short little ditty. So growing up, angel food cake was a staple at every birthday until we got to a certain age, and then it's all genies cakes, right? But up to then, it was angel food cakes, and I love that the ceremony of this. But the poem is actually about language. When you're young and you're sort of discovering how words work, and just sort of the mystery and the wonderment of that, and the complexity of it. Angel food cake. You spent every childhood birthday at this cherry mouth of memory. Angel food, the very name conjuring mystique. Communion of your young life's occasions. Its sponge dissolved like a salve on your tongue, and you wondered, am I an angel then? Thank you. You can do it. You can't.
Oh, there we go. All right, well, while you're getting settled, I just want to say, I think you win the award for the single most Winnipeg image or Manitoba image. Do you guys know which image I'm referring to? Pierogies. Lungs, their lungs were boiled pierogies. It's actually perfect and so prairies. Like did you ever find when you went out east, people were like, you're like, okay, I've gone to the store, I want a bag of pierogies. And they're like, pierogies, you say? We don't have those here.
It's better now.
Yeah, will they have pierogies in Toronto now?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but just because it's part of the chain.
Yes. Yeah. All right, well, first of all, congratulations on this book, and thank you so much for doing a hometown launch. Because you know, you have to bring your home home. Gordon. You're actually also taking a picture of the YouTube audience
Oh, yeah.
because the camera's right there.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so we're gonna go through some questions and then you will have time for your burning questions. So tell me about your journey as a poet, right? Both here in Winnipeg when you were in your 20s, and then when you moved to Toronto and became like a parent and a person with a full-time job. And then, as you said, stopped writing for a while and then came back, heard the siren song of poetry, like bags of pierogies, finally landing in Toronto supermarkets. So tell me about that. Tell me about how you did all of this.
So in the 90s, I was in creative communications, which everybody in Manitoba has creative communications, secondary program. And our creative writing instructor at the time was Patrick Friesen, who's this amazing poet. And he really introduced us to a lot of incredible contemporary Canadian poets who were writing at the time. And I was just like super excited about poetry. I just like fell in love with it. And then when, at the same time as this like beautiful sort of kaleidoscope world was opening up for me, that's when I was diagnosed with melanoma, and at that sort of same time. And I remember just thinking like, why are these two things happening? Why are they happening? What's going on? And then I sort of realized, well, this is a gift from the universe to say, like, I'm going to help you through this darkness, and poetry will be the thing that helps me through. And so I really kind of threw myself into poetry and writing poetry. I really was conscious about trying to do it, I don't want to say well, but like trying to make art, not necessarily just like, you know, therapeutic sort of, you know, get it off my chest or whatever. I really wanted to like make something out of it. So that's sort of where my journey started. And lo and behold, I had a little bit of success here, and that was great. And then we moved to Toronto, and I was just overwhelmed with I had a lot of other medical issues that were sort of popping up. And the fallout of the melanoma, I think, was there's a mental fallout to it. There's an emotional fallout, and so I developed quite a lot of anxiety. So unfortunately, instead of using poetry to help me through that, I just kind of like shut down altogether. So I didn't write for quite a while. Then after I had my daughter, it came back, or it came back to me, or I came back to it. And it's sort of like learning how to walk again, I think. But I sort of stuck with it, and I would write when my daughter was my husband would take my daughter on Saturday mornings to do a bunch of activities, and I would be in bed just writing away, or they would go visit the grandparents up north, and I would just have like a weekend to myself. So just through like those sort of snippets of time, I was able to, you know, start working on this collection. And then I took the Humber School for Writers program, where I really was able to focus on like a real concerted effort to get an actual full manuscript together. So that's sort of how I did it. It was just sort of this slow, steady, and then of course you have to be marketing the pieces of the poems, marketing them to literary magazines, and that's an effort as well. And so there's like a lot of these different components, and I just sort of like stuck with it. Yeah, I just sort of kept going, and I'd probably get like one poem published in a year, and that was enough. Like I submitted a few things, but there's all that I could do. And yeah, I'm busy, you know, full-time job, mom, family living away. So it's busy, but I could feel grateful that I was able to have some time to myself to be able to kind of move things forward. And yeah, take heart, like late bloomers, man. You can get it done.
Well, and it is, it's actually a lot of effort putting together a collection, right? Like you can write poems, you can have them in your journal, you can edit them, but like figuring out how to take 50 or 60 poems and put them in one place and make them in relation to each other and then reorder them and edit them, like that's actually a massive effort. And a lot of poets who write their entire lives never get there, right? Like it's actually a lot of effort.
It was.
And it's dreaming. It's dreaming bigger than you do at the level of a poem.
Yeah, no, that I found that to be challenging as well. Sort of, yeah, zooming out to be able to see like what does this whole thing look like together. I think it's probably been quite common to have a first collection that is just a poems kind of randomly written, right? It's not like I didn't sit down and go like, here's my theme, and I'm gonna look. It didn't. I just sort of like whatever I could do, and then when I had enough, it was the process of like looking at it holistically and seeing where the themes were emerging, like they just emerged naturally, which was good. But it was hard to get there. Like it was a lot of work to get there. And I remember spreading out my poems on the bed.
Did you lay them out on the floor?
I did, on the bed.
Yeah, our generation. I'm a little older than you, but I'm including you in my generation, my cohort. What you do is you get to a certain point, you do it on the computer, and then you're like, I can't see it anymore. And then you print it all out and put it on the floor or your bed, and you literally move it around like that. And I find that really helps me. Okay, poets here, do you guys still do that? Do you still, okay, yeah, print out and on the floor? Yeah, so it's not generational.
No.
It's like literally the only thing that's not generational. So tell me about, now we're talking about first book and a debut. So tell me about book lust and what that is. It's not when you're attracted to books romantically, that's not it. Book lust is when you've got an emerging writer and they so want to publish their first book. They can't wait for their first book. Everyone they know has a book but them. You know, you have this like anxiety, right? That you want, because when you meet people and say, oh, I'm a writer, and they go, oh, do you have any books? Where's your book? And you're like, no, I don't have a book. There's no book yet. And they're like, oh, so you're a writer. So tell me about your book lust or the overweening desire to publish a book.
Yeah, like I think I probably, because I stopped writing for a while, I probably just like the world passed me by. So like all my peers who may have been, publishing, like I just kind of like got over that because I can't like, you can't get time back, right? So I was sort of like on my own little path. It was really just about wanting to just complete the circle of this thing that I've been working on so hard, So it wasn't necessarily about like, ticking a box or like trying to keep up with my peers or the Joneses or whatever, but it was more about, just seeing through the full life cycle of what this could be. Yeah.
So life cycles of mosquitoes.
Similar to that, yes,
poetry collections.
Exactly.
So tell me about working in communications. Does it steal from or add to your poetry?
It's a good question. So it's true that I work with words all day long. And so I work for a government agency. And so the words are pretty like corporatese and kind of jargony and it's a technical field as well. So I'm like constantly in my role trying to clarify, cut down, cut through the clutter, just get to the point, like, come on, let's go. And so that for sure is that sort of influences me in the way that I write poetry as well. But at the same time, it's also a bit exhausting to be working with words all day long. And then on your off hours, you're trying to, also working with words. But I think the way that I sort of came, like, the way that I sort of looked at it was there are, a lot of what I do in my day job is like messages and meanings of words and meanings of, things that I'm working on. And with poetry, it's not just about the meaning of the words. There's the rhythm, there's the imagery, there's the musicality of a poem. So and that's what I love the most is writing imagery and working rhythm into my poems. So I think I sort of like found solace there where I could it was more like my playtime.
Almost the complete opposite intent, right? Like poetry is condensed the way that a report is condensed, but its goals are different.
Yeah.
right? Like you're trying to communicate ideas, and maybe there's a little bit of obfuscation with government things, maybe just a tiny amount. But you know, in poetry, you're trying to play and evoke things, but to do it in a really this compressed space, like a really small canvas, and in some ways the biggest canvas, right?
Yeah.
But what I really love about, and I can really see what you're talking about in that first poem that you read, remember Various Cuts, and she's like, marrow soft, baby back, lily livered, skirt steak, chop smack. Like, listen to all those like compound words that she's making, right? Like, I really noticed that and really loved it in this work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Can you tell me why you're drawn to that? That sort of, that in particular, those compound nouns? Words.
I think it's more just about trying to create something new, trying to have something that's a bit jarring. I like the juxtaposition of things, of kind of opposites or things that kind of jar you and make you like sit up and take notice of like, oh, that's very interesting. But also, like to your point, the rhythm that's created when you do that is very interesting. So it's, you know, it kind of it can either like kind of bounce around or it can kind of chop smack, you know, and I love just playing. I think it's sort of like playing around, playing the sandbox.
Yeah, and I can, you can, it's both satisfying as art, but it's also satisfying to see you play, right? Because I can sense that you're playing there, and I like being able to watch that.
I love reading it. Yeah. I love reading that particular poem. Yeah. I like the musicality of it.
All right, well, we're going to go to questions in just a second, but first, I just want to ask you one last question. So your work is so like visceral and embodied, right? It's so much about writing the female body and writing the sick body and what that's like. So can you talk a little bit about that in your work?
There's for sure, there are a number of poems that relate to medical traumas. I've had my own experiences, not just the melanoma, but with fertility, pregnancy loss, and endometriosis surgeries, lots of sort of invasive procedures. And I think that you sort of internalize all of that, and in our, once again, the patriarchy, women are not, the things that happen to us are not that important. They're kind of like, we're not taught to, that it's okay to talk about things that we're going through that are, you know, typically female related. So I think that it was important. I think for me, it was sort of important to give voice to those little silences, that this sort of inner invisible. That's the other thing, is they're very visible. Nobody would know looking at me, like I've got these things going on, and probably everybody in this room has things going on. You can't like see some things. So they're just because of that invisibility. It's important to, I felt it important anyways, to just breathe life into that and bring it out into the world in a poem, and make it concrete. And that was helpful and healing. And also having the book published as well, and having something that somebody else might be going through a similar experience. And I just think that's sort of like part of the healing journey, I think, is like to be able to share with other people, connect with other people. Maybe something resonates with somebody and they can, you know, take solace or take comfort in a shared lived experience. And that's really important. Or else even just having, you know, somebody who can't experience the same thing, like a man can't have endometriosis, but maybe they could be more compassionate or, you know, understanding of what somebody else may be going through, even if they aren't able to experience it themselves. So, yeah. Cool.
All right, John. Oh, look, he steps out.
The Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. There he is, he popped out. So now it's time for more questions, which I'm sure will far surpass my questions. So, if anyone has a question.
We do have one that's coming from online. So Alyssa was hoping that you could comment on how the cover came together and mentions that it's very interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, it's Natalie Olson from Kiss Cut Design. She's phenomenal. And we sort of put together, Claire Kelly, my production coordinator, and I put together sort of some ideas that we were hoping for Natalie to kind of play around with. And a couple of the ideas we had were to take the meat chart aspect and take the meat of rump and flank, which is quite literal and obvious, and then we had this other idea of the cherries and the sort of mystique of that fruit. Cherries and pomegranates are just like fruit. Is this blood? Is this juice? Is this, like, what is this? And when the concepts came back, when the concepts came back, I found that the meat ones were they were like too meaty. They were too obvious and too, too literal.
So you want a plant-based version of it.
I want
suitable for vegans and vegetarians everywhere.
Exactly. I wanted I don't know if this is, but I wanted something that I could have out on the coffee table, and I don't know, is that a coffee table kind of book? But the other ones I just felt like were too it was almost like a Dexter, Dexter the serial killer. Yeah, they were like the kill room. It was not, it was like, no.
So you don't see your poetry collections being like an abattoir or abattoir adjacent?
No.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so that's sort of how it came together.
Are there any questions locally?
Bueller?
Oh.
You meant to talk about the finishing process. So I guess when you mentioned having all the pieces of paper spread out on the bed and everything, did you have moments where it was like, this is it, and the satisfaction of it, or was it like you need to leave and come back, either in the writing process or in the actual thing together of everything?
So this was a question about the finishing process of the manuscript as well, specifically in relation to Carol's earlier comment about laying all the pieces out in front of her and reviewing them then. And just wondering if there was ever a moment where there was a sense of completion there, or whether you had to walk away from it and then revisit it later.
Oh, I walked away and came back and walked away and came back. And when I honestly, years, it was years probably until I actually landed on what I thought was the right grouping of these poems. It was a very difficult task for me. I'm on ADHD medication now, and I feel like maybe that would have helped me back then, because I honestly, I was just spinning. I was just but it could be this, but it could also be this, and it could also be this, and it could also be this. And yeah, there was just no shortage of ways that I was trying to, the patterns I was seeing a lot of different patterns, but when it did come together, it was sort of I think I had to go through that process to just narrow down, focus. And eventually I got there, but medication would help.
But you were saying that your editor for this collection didn't really suggest a lot of changes to the structure of the manuscript. So
yes.
Obviously you arrived at something that was satisfactory for people that are not you.
Yeah, I did. That's the one thing that I did play around with. The poems themselves were quite complete, according to him. And it was, the one thing that I did have to do though was land on the groupings. And so that is one thing that I did work on, but yeah, it took me a while. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Oh.
You can't see this on the internet, but John just walked across an entire bank of chairs like an acrobat.
It's very impressive.
Okay, so I was thinking of what you were saying about when you began to write poetry and how
we wanted it to be not therapy, but display art right from the beginning. And I'm curious, the kind of thinking back to when I started taking poetry seriously and was trying to learn how to do it better. Where did you find the tools to learn how to make it art?
So this is a question about your earlier comment about wanting to make your poetry art from the beginning. And basically just a question from a fellow poet about how you got to that point and how you did begin to comfortably make it art.
Thank you for that question. That's a good one. I think I just read and read and read and read and went to readings and listened. And I had Patrick, so in the second year of the Humber Program, we had a big project, and I chose to do a poetry manuscript for that. And I was also working with Patrick Friesen through the Writers Guild Mentor Program. And so I think his mentorship in particular was quite useful for me to understand what works. And the one thing that he would say was, you have to read it out loud. You have to, before it's finished, like it has to be finished to your ear before it's finished. And I really, really took that to heart. And Patrick's poems too are very rhythmic and very, right? Like he's, and so I think that sort of helped guide me in terms of giving me some, I guess, direction on what constitutes a good poem. Yeah.
And then later you did the Humber Program with Karen Connolly. So was that when you came back to poetry? So was that, as a poetry cult recruiter myself, I'm glad to hear you got drawn back in. You were able to leave for a while, do other things in the world, and then you were drawn back in. So did Karen have give you any other sort of tools or ways of being as a poet?
She was great. Yeah, she was, her sense of humor is just awesome. And I think that she always encouraged me, just go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. Because I'm a bit of a wuss, and I don't necessarily always want to get into the super, like, you know, I don't want to dredge up too much emotion sometimes if I'm writing about something that's very personal to me. But she would just keep encouraging me to go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. So I found that really helpful, and I could probably still listen to that advice, and I could probably still go further.
Well, the good thing about poetry is there's always, it's like a impossible staircase. Even then you can always keep climbing and then fall down a few stairs and then keep going. Yep. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a really good tip. And I tell people, you know, emerging poets, you know, read your stuff out loud, and they're like, what if someone hears me? I'm like, find some place where you can do that, or go mutter to yourself in the corner, right? Because you literally have to say it out loud, and people are like, I'm gonna look foolish. I'm like, oh, welcome to poetry.
It's so true. It's so true.
Are there any more questions?
None from online. Are there any locally? Yes.
I can bridge up with your artsy one. Essentially, like, that's all what we've been asking already, but in your writing or editing, how concerned are you, or how much do you focus on texture and patterns within any artistic level that you take?
In your writing and editing, how much do you focus on texture and patterns?
That's a very good question. Yes, a lot, I think. But I don't always think that I'm conscious of it. I just think that it's part of trying to create like a visceral experience, that like texture is an important mechanism, I guess, for building imagery and building that. And I think that I'm very drawn to trying to make a reader feel something, feel like these words in their bodies when they're reading it. And so I think, yeah, texture is a really important part of that. And then the patterns, I think, just seem to occur. they're just, I think they just sort of are coming through because they're things that interest me probably. So thank you, that's a really good question.
And texture in terms of sound and language too, right?
Mhm.
Like, I find your work very focused on sound.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I do. It's the music. I love music, and I'm very tuned. Pardon me. Very tuned to music. Get it? Yeah. Thanks.
And we do have time for one more question. Does anyone have one? Yes.
Did you have a favorite piece within the book, or is it because your first book, like almost a level of sentiment or appreciation for all?
Do you have a favorite piece in the book, or because it is your first book, is there a level of sentiment or affection for all of it?
I know, like, they're all my babies, right? So I can't like pick favorites. I really like I have a series in the second section called Typefacing, which is this goofy little series of poems about fonts, like typeface. And I loved playing with that. I thought that was like a lot of fun. So I would say that is my, I can't read them because you have to see it, because it's set in the font, the typeface that is that the poem is about. So you kind of have to see the whole thing. So unfortunately, I can't really read them because it doesn't really work. But
Unless you had an overhead projector.
Yes, I guess I could.
Or a tattoo, you had like the tattoo on your arm. And you show people.
Zoom in on it.
Yeah, that's super cool. I guess you could, for Zoom, she's done some,
Yes.
because this is a pandemic book, it's been launched mostly via Zoom, right? But so at least with Zoom, you can show people your bedroom, but also hold up the book.
Yeah.
So everyone can see it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, I don't, I love, I like quite a few of them. I don't think I could choose. Yeah, thank you.
If you both have any closing comments you might like to offer, please feel free to do so, and then we will summon Charlene Deal from the Writers Festival to the podium.
Summon. Well, do you have any closing thoughts?
Just thanks. Like, oh my God, this has been like honestly just a dream come true, having this book out in the world, but then being able to celebrate it here with my friends and family in real life. Oh my God, it's really special. So just once again, thank you to Charlene, thank you to John and McNally, and thanks to all of you for coming. Thank you. This was amazing, and we had dinner. She's the most kind and generous.
Lies.
No.
I paid her in carrot cakes. And they have really good carrot cake here. So that is a dear payment. But my final thought is that everybody should jump to their feet and give her the long delayed pandemic launch of this book.
That is a Winnipeg ovation, right? Well, that was really great. And as a person who periodically for great long periods of time strays from poetry, I'm really feeling like I'm kind of getting drawn back in. So the conversation was great. The reading was really interesting. And the questions were really good too. It was just so nice to be in a space where we're thinking hard about writing. I guess this is one of the great things about being able to gather in person again. I really do miss it. I have missed it. And so I'm so glad to see all of you here tonight. This is part of the Thin Air 2022. Our festival is now in full swing, started yesterday, and we have several events coming up here. Most of them are starting the 1st of October, but we do have 2 virtual events in partnership with McNally Robinson next week. One is the Free Press Book Club, which is a 3-way partnership for this month, which with Margaret Sweatman's The Gunsmith's Daughter, which is just a stunning novel. That one is an online option if you're interested. And then on September 30th, we are having a Nijote Stories, which is our way of observing the Truth and Reconciliation Day with a really incredible Anishinaabe storyteller named Bumgishig Isaac Murdoch, and he's our guest for that night, and that also will be virtual. So if you're excited about doing online events, because after all, whoever gets to do those could be most welcome. The festival, you can find out what we're doing in person and online at thinairfestival.ca. So we're really thrilled to be doing events here at McNally, which is, as we all know, like the best bookstore really on the planet. So let's give a bit of a shout out to this. I'll just echo John to say, please do take a minute to line up at the signing table and see Carol's book up close. It's really beautiful cover and beautiful interiors. And we are supposed to all be very quiet and let her scoot off there first so she doesn't get mobbed, because we're all kind of dangerous. So one more big round of applause, please, for Carol.